So, well, this is our first official welcome. Welcome to our first MindStrong Lab. So, with the MindStrong Labs, my plan is to do them every third Tuesday of every month. This is normally meant to be for those who have taken the Legend Life Pledge. So these are people who are committed to becoming what I call Legend Life Questers. Basically, I see how we approach life to approach it like an adventure, like a quest. So it's an ongoing journey where we're looking to optimize ourselves, looking to realize our potential, discover and live our purpose, achieve self mastery, and then also, most importantly, that we actually get to live our best lives. So tonight I've opened it up to the rest of the community, Legion Life community, so everyone else on the email list, people who have attended one or more of my summits. And then so if you're, but next time round, so the next month, I'll only be making this available for people who have actually taken the pledge. So the pledge is free. It's just basically it's kind of like putting a line in the sand and saying, I'm committed to actually going on this journey to live my best life, or what I call a legend life. So, what does it mean to be mind strong? Mind strong doesn't mean that we are going to be impervious to stress, that we are going to be um, completely mentally tough. We're going to be like people who are completely without any difficulties in life. We're going to be completely resilient. Never going to face or have problems with adversity. It actually means we're developing the psychological skills required to perform at our best when life becomes challenging. So we're going to learn some skills and have the ability to meet challenges, adversity, and hardship and deal with stress more effectively. So we're not going to allow it to derail us. But this is a learnt capacity, and that's what Mind Strong is. So when we're mind strong, we're able to navigate life more effectively because we don't allow the hardships, the challenges to negatively impact us. We still show up as the best versions of ourselves. We still experience the difficulties and emotions related to what we're experiencing, but we're able to navigate them effectively. We're not going to be completely derailed and then find ourselves caught up struggling with this on an ongoing basis. So we're also able to develop the inner capacities required for confidence, resilience, focus, being more present, courage, and that we're able to take purposeful, committed action. So the MindStrong Labs are not meant to be a masterclass. So it's not me going to be giving you a bunch of content for the next 50 to 60 minutes. It's actually me going to be teaching you a particular practice, and then we're going to practice it together. And then I'm going to set you a challenge to actually put this into practice in your day to day for the next month, because we actually only develop mental fitness when we experience it in real time. So many of you have attended my summits and you've consumed a lot of content. But with our MindStrong Labs, the intent is that we do something. If you've gone back to my refreshed website, I talk about something called Vita Activa. So what is that? So that is active living. So we don't just consume content, we don't just consume knowledge, we don't consume information about how we become mentally fit. We actually learn so that we can apply it in real life, because that's when we actually really begin to create real changes in our lives. So when we actually apply it, we get to experience it. That's when things begin to actually change. Consuming and learning a bunch of content doesn't change or transform our relationship with stress, with adversity, with challenges or hardship. We only change when we actually start to apply practices like we're going to learn today and practices we're going to learn in future MindStrong Labs. So these are going to be monthly. Masterclasses are different. This is where I teach a little bit, but I also will try to make them practical. And in fact, next week I'll be running a live masterclass once again on stress. So this will be a big focus for us this month and the next month, and leading into another summit I'm hosting in October, which is called the MindStrong Summit. So that'll be a 5-day summit where you'll learn more and go into a little bit more detail about how to become mind strong. So with each lab, I'll give you one mind strong skill. I'll teach it. Then you'll get to practice it, as I mentioned, and then I'll give you homework, which will be a mini challenge. So this is not like you're going to spend 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. It's going to be like 3 to 4, or maybe up to 5 minutes a day where you're going to put something into practice. The idea is that, a little bit like a gym, you are not, I'm not going to give you everything and then you're going to train every single muscle in your body. We're going to focus on one muscle, one mind strong or mental fitness exercise. And then we're going to train it. We're going to learn how to use it, and then we're going to apply it in real life. So today we're going to work on something that I think is fundamental to becoming more mind strong, and that is how to stop getting stuck in stress after the original event has passed. Because something interesting happens with stress. Sometimes the event is over, but we're not. So the conversation's finished, the email has been sent, the meeting ended, the person we're having a discussion with walks away, the problem's resolved, but we still are thinking about it. We still keep replaying it. We're still feeling angry or upset, disappointed, or whatever the emotion is. We still keep on replaying what we experienced. So we're still worried about what might happen. We're still having the same conversation in our head. So today we're going to look at why that happens, and more importantly, give you one simple practice that you can use whenever you notice it happening to kind of put it to make it end. So let's start with something really important. So an event does not have meaning by itself. So what is an event? So something happens, so there's a trigger, so something happens. So this is the event. But the meaning of that event is something our mind creates. So an event by itself has no intrinsic meaning at all. It doesn't have a meaning until we actually give it a meaning. So imagine that someone sends you a message. So the message may be, can we talk tomorrow? So that's the event. And this is the only fact. You received a message from someone, either email, WhatsApp, SMS, that says, can we talk tomorrow? But immediately your mind might say, what have I done? Are they unhappy with me? Am I in trouble? Something must be wrong. So these are the meaning we've attributed to the fact that we have received this message, can we talk tomorrow? Another person who receives that exactly the same message may think, great, I wonder what they want to discuss. So you notice, same event, same facts, but completely different meaning. Different internal response. And that's incredibly important because our brain doesn't simply respond to what is happening. Most of us think that we are responding to the actual factual situation of what's happening. But this is not the case. Our brain is constantly trying to work out, what does this mean? And it does that using what it already knows. And that's unique to every single one of us. So it uses our previous experiences, our memories, our beliefs, our identity, which are basically the accumulation of beliefs that we've actually, over the course of our life, brought together. And this is who we think we are, our expectations. So when something happens today, your brain can very quickly compare it with something from the past and say, I've seen this before, I know what this means. And that prediction can happen before you have consciously thought about it. So your nervous system's constantly scanning, and then it will notice patterns in what you're experiencing, the event, and then it will look back at its memory banks and draw up something from the past which looks similar, and then it will attribute a meaning because in the past, similar patterned event, you've attributed some kind of meaning. So now your nervous system will bring this up, communicate this to the brain, and this will be the meaning you give to that factual situation. So you're not actually seeing the situation as it actually is. You're looking at it through the lens of that past meaning you gave to a similar event. So you're not actually seeing reality as it actually is. And that meaning can trigger your stress response because of that meaning attributed to a similar event, the patterns that look similar to your nervous system, and they were given a meaning. This is dangerous. This is threatening. Um, this is something that causes shame. This is something that is not good for Damien. Then this can trigger a stress response. And this will be a physiological response. So this is not cognitive. This happens at a somatic level that happens in our body. So our nervous system is constantly scanning and interpreting things based on past information. So the quality of the interpretation of what we're experiencing depends on the quality of the meaning it was given in the past. So our prefrontal cortex at this time is not online because if it's something that our nervous system detects as a potential stress, it's relying on our fight and flight part of our brain, the amygdala, and then it'll create an interpretation which is this is risky, so let's have a stress response. And that happens at a physiological level. So, and this is where we often get stuck. The original event happens, your mind gives it meaning, you experience an emotional and physiological response, and then your mind keeps thinking about the event. So you replay it, you analyze it, you worry about it, you imagine what might happen next, you judge yourself how you reacted, you feel guilty, you feel ashamed, and now you have a second layer of stress. So you're not only dealing with the original situation, which was stressful based on the interpretation you gave it, but now you're dealing with your reaction to that situation. And this is where we can get caught in what is called a stress loop. So something happens, we give it a meaning, we react, we don't like our reaction. So based on that stress response, we have a behavioral reaction or an emotional reaction, and we start having these thoughts. And then we don't like this reaction, and then we judge ourselves. So it could be guilt, could be shame, and this creates more stress. And the more stressed we become, the harder it is to see the situation objectively. So we keep reinforcing the original story. So we get caught in these patterns. So these are patterned into us. And then when we respond to these patterns, so we have these patterns, they create emotional, thought, and behavioral reactions. And then we, on top of these, we don't like these reactions. So classic example would be emotional eater. So emotional eater, so there's an event, creates a stress response. They have a behavioral reaction, which is a way to soothe themselves through the stress response. So they rely on food. And then because they've eaten, possibly not necessarily the most healthiest foods, so then they start feeling shame. They begin to blame themselves for actually doing this once again. And once again, they become stressed. And so,
Hello, hello, hello.
hello. So,
Good, how you doing?
good. Can you mute yourself, please? Let me mute. Okay, sorry about that. So let's get back into it. So, what can we do about this? We don't try to tell ourselves, don't be stressed, because now we're offline, so our prefrontal cortex is not offline. We've got our amygdala actually working because telling ourselves that it doesn't stress doesn't work because our amygdala, our prefrontal cortex is not actually operating. So, and we can't immediately try to change the meaning either because our stress response is a pattern behavior. Our nervous system has like created this meaning about using a meaning from the past. So what we need to do is first create enough space to actually bring our prefrontal cortex back online. So the very first thing we need to do is step one, to pause. So when you notice yourself becoming activated, you want to stop. So you don't want to immediately react. You don't want to immediately respond to whatever created the stress response. You don't want to send that email. Perhaps you got a negative, received a negative email from someone. Your immediate reaction is you want to go back angrily to them. So you don't want to be doing that. And you don't immediately want to be making a decision. And you don't want to immediately continue the argument in your head. You want to pause. And the most effective way to pause is to use your breath. So you're going to create a little bit of physiological space. And you can do that. You don't need to do any complex breath work practice. You can simply pay attention to your breathing and take in some deep breaths through your nose, then out again through your nose, but if it's more comfortable, out through your actual mouth. So a good and effective form of breath to actually create this pause is something called a 4-6 breath, which basically means you're going to breathe in for a count of 4. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and then you're going to breathe out. You can do this through the mouth if it's more comfortable for you. And then you're just going to count for 6. And you're just going to do a couple cycles of this because this basically helps your parasympathetic, basically activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So you're stimulating your vagus nerve, telling you you're safe and secure, and it creates some space and it gets you out of that stress response, out of fight or flight, and now you're in in that space where you can actually start bringing online your prefrontal cortex, which is the only thing available to you to really challenge this situation and think about other possibilities. So you want to use the breath. You don't need to use the 4-6. You can simply breathe in for a count, just gentle breaths. Like there's another form of breath, which is called coherent breathing, where you just breathe in slowly for a count of 5 and breathe out for a count of 5. So you just want to focus on the breath. Nothing complicated. Don't need to do anything special. If you're already familiar with breath work, you can obviously use one of the tools that you've trained yourself in at this particular point in time. So the objective isn't to perform a perfect breathing technique. The objective is to get out of automatic reaction long enough to think, long enough to bring the prefrontal cortex online so that you can actually ask yourself what actually happened. So now we're trying to get to the real facts of the situation. So in step 2, we want to separate fact from story. Because remember, the meaning is a story we're attributing to an event which has no intrinsic meaning at all until we actually give it a meaning. So everyone on this call tonight can experience the same event and we can all have completely different interpretations of that event based on our previous history, based on our previous experiences, based on where our nervous system detected this was something stressful or a threat to our safety and security, or maybe it's actually benign to us. It doesn't actually have any effect on us. And actually, it may be something positive to us. So each of us will have a completely different experience. So what we actually want to do with step 2 is actually see the real facts of the situation. So we want to imagine as though we have a camera. So a camera records the situation as it is. It doesn't show assumptions, intentions, what we think, what we're afraid of. It just records the observable facts. So we want to pretend that we're using a camera to take a picture of what that particular event is, to see the actual facts of the actual situation. So, fact, my boss or my partner or my friend sent me a message asking to speak tomorrow. That's it. That's the factual situation. That's the event that actually occurred. There's nothing in there about our interpretation of it. So it's pure fact. So we're not going to be adding my boss, my friend, or my partner is unhappy with me. We're not going to add, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to get divorced. My friend doesn't want to be my friend anymore. We're not going to add any emotional narrative or story to it. We're not going to think that I've obviously done something wrong or any of those kind of interpretations. So these may in fact be the truth of the situation, but we don't actually know because we don't have enough facts to actually come up with an explanation of what's actually occurred. And this distinction is very important because once you separate the fact from the story, you create space. And with space, we can choose to respond to the situation. In step 3, you want to ask yourself, what meaning am I actually giving to this? So this is the layer we put on top of the interpretation of the experience or the event we're actually having. So here we actually want to be very honest. We don't want to color it up in any way. Just spell out how exactly you are interpreting that particular event at this particular point of time. So, what is the story or what is your interpretation of this event? Just as it is. So, it could be I'm going to be criticized. They don't respect me. I've failed. Something bad is going to happen. I'm not good enough. So, and then once you've identified this meaning, so imagine you can have like a free columns and some other columns for some of the other steps. So one column you're going to actual factual situation. Second column you're actually going to put your story with regard that situation, and then in the third column, once we've identified the meaning we've given to this particular event, then we're going to actually check if this is actually true or not. So the question you're going to ask yourself is, do I actually know that this is true? Not, could it be true? The question is, do I actually know? Because we're going to go, so it's yes or no here. So, because basically we're establishing whether or not in that moment, based on the meaning, factually, this is actually 100% what I know about this situation. In 99.9% of situations, we actually don't know because we don't have enough information. We can only work on our assumptions based on our past to create an interpretation of what we're experiencing. So the reality is we're not actually seeing reality. We're just creating an interpretation of that situation. So now in step 5, we want to go, what else could this mean? So now we're activating curiosity. Because an interesting thing about our brains are, if we actually start to get curious, we actually interrupt the stress loop. We actually interrupt the amygdala. So once we ask a question, our brain is set up that it actually needs to investigate that question because it likes to actually resolve puzzles. So our brain will shift from the amygdala in a stress response and take us into the prefrontal cortex. So if we activate curiosity, that gets us out of being reactionary and gets us into that space where we can actually respond to the situation more effectively. So the question we want to ask, what else could this mean? So we've given our story, and now we want to be curious and then go, well, are there other possibilities? Then you want to come up with one, two, and even possibly three alternatives. You don't have to believe these alternatives right now. You simply need to prove to your brain that its first interpretation isn't the only possible interpretation. So let's use the example we used before. So maybe your boss, your friend, your partner just wants to discuss a new opportunity, a new thing they want to explore with you. Maybe they need more information. Maybe they're looking to you for advice. Maybe they're simply scheduling a meeting or a get together or even going to the movies, perhaps. So maybe there is a problem, but maybe there's not. So you don't know yet. And that's the whole point. You don't know what the actual situation really is. So your original meaning may in fact not actually be factual. So you don't need to replace a negative story with a positive story. You don't need to replace certainty with curiosity. Instead, you just want to know, I know what this means. So instead of I know what this means, you move to I don't know yet. And this is a much more powerful mental position because now you can be more inquisitive. You can actually find out what the situation is rather than just reacting from what you think it might be about. And then in the last step, we get to choose our response. And this is the part that makes you become mind strong. Because rather than simply an exercise in thinking, you're going to ask, given what I actually know, what is the best response available to me? You're going to choose what is the most appropriate response given the information you currently have available based on the event or experience you actually have had. So sometimes the answer may be do nothing. Sometimes it may be ask a question. Sometimes it is have the conversation. Sometimes it means setting a boundary. Sometimes it is correct something I've done. Sometimes it may be I need to apologize. Sometimes it means gather more information. And sometimes it's take action on something I've been avoiding. And sometimes the most powerful action is simply let it go. The objective isn't to make the situation disappear. The objective is to make sure your response is chosen rather than automatic. So we're going to move from being reactionary, which is basically where we get caught up in the stress loop, to where we actually become responsive. We actually choose how we want to respond to that situation because we actually don't really know the answers at this particular point in time in most situations. We just attributed a meaning based on our past experiences because we've seen that tone of voice, that tone of email, the way that message has been sent to us. It all leads to our nervous system having and detecting a pattern and attributing a meaning we've given to something similar in the past. So let's make this incredibly simple because this process should take you just a couple minutes. So when you notice something, feel yourself getting stuck in stress. So you feel yourself physiologically like your body's starting to get tense. You're noticing you're feeling a bit dysregulated. You want to pause. So then you're going to use your breath to create a space. So you're just not going to be worried about a particular breath type. You can just breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth or through your nose again. And you're just going to do that for a couple rounds. You don't have to count if you don't want to. You just think about the breath and feel the breath going through you. And then this is creating some space. Then you're going to ask yourself, what actually happened? So what are the facts of the situation? Now you're going to ask yourself, what is the story I've been telling about this event? So what meaning am I actually giving to it? Then you're going to check, do I actually know that this meaning is true? Yes or no? And then what else could be true? So what are some alternative possibilities, some alternative um, reasons or explanations for what's actually occurred? And then you're going to choose the most constructive response available to you. So you don't need a worksheet, you don't need 20 questions, you just need to follow these steps. And then I'm recording this so you can replay this to get these steps, and then you can just note them down. And this should take you 2 to 3 minutes. So the whole purpose of this is so you get to practice seeing the difference between reality, so the factual situation, and the meaning your mind has added to reality. Because in most cases, stress is based on the meaning we've attributed to an event. So the event itself may not actually be stressful. And in fact, stress is not bad. Stress is only bad when it becomes chronic stress. It's when we perpetuate stress on an ongoing basis and it turns into a bit of a loop. So stress is good. Stress means we're getting out of our comfort zone. Stress means that we are going beyond what we're currently comfortable with. And when we go beyond what we're comfortable with, we actually begin to grow. So when we in a gym, when we train, do any kind of physical activity, we stress our bodies when we go out of what we're comfortable with, and the net result is we become fitter. Similarly, with our brain, when we take it out of what it's comfortable and challenge it, this is causing it some stress. It actually improves, we grow new connections, we develop something called using neuroplasticity, we begin to grow our capacities. So whatever we do, we actually need stress. The problem is when we actually, based on the meanings we get to events, create these stress loops where it becomes chronic stress. It keeps on repeating itself and we don't escape from the stress. Like our body is always in a stress loop. So now let's put this into practice. So as I indicated, labs are about actually experiencing these things in real time. So you actually want to experience this because you can't just learn this information and then suddenly we're in this event and then try to actually implement a process. You actually want to train yourself to be able to do this. Like when you do any kind of like physical activity training, you're doing this so you have that capacity available to you when you actually need it. So you can't expect to be fit when you haven't trained yourself to be fit. So if you suddenly challenge and you have to go for that long walk or you have to do something very strenuous, well, then it's going to feel very stressful for you because you haven't prepared or trained yourself to be able to do it. So now this is why we need to put whatever we do in our MindStrong labs, whenever we're actually looking to improve how we deal with things in our lives, we need to actually put this into practice. So what I want you to do right now, so we're going to put this into practice right now. I want you to choose something that's been challenging for you, perhaps irritating, frustrating, worrying in the last week. So don't choose something that's completely overwhelming and your biggest trauma in your life. Just choose something that's been challenging for you this week. So maybe you can note in the chat what that challenging thing is to see what has been challenging for you so we can all get an idea. So what's been challenging for you this week? So think about it. If you're uncomfortable writing about it, just think about it. Maybe it's a challenging discussion with someone. Maybe you did receive that email that kind of like triggered you. Whatever it is. So have a think about that. So maybe someone canceled an appointment, maybe your partner, your friend, your boss said something that annoyed you, maybe you were criticized by a coworker, your manager at work, maybe you received an email that bothered you, or even you procrastinated on something important. You put off something that is important to you and basically you put it off and didn't actually do it. So just choose one. So now you want to write down just three things. So what? So remember the idea of the three columns. So column one, if you wanted to use a column, what happened? So write the facts. What are the actual facts? So imagine there was a camera and it can only take a picture of what actually occurred. So there are no emotions, there's no meaning attached, just the facts of the situation. I received an email. Someone made this comment to me. Someone cancelled an appointment. So there's no meaning, you're not attributing any emotion to it. Now, write down what meaning did I give to it? So you can use, I interpreted this to mean, so you get the facts. And what did you interpret these facts to mean? So don't censor yourself, don't try to make it positive. Write actually what went on in your mind when you had that experience. So I can relate to experience. I was interviewing someone and they said to me that um, you appear not to be interested in the conversation. So I took, well, this person thinks that I'm not interested. Like they think I'm not a very good interviewer. So all these things went into my kind of like mind. But they just made an observation because that was their interpretation of the situation. It wasn't true because I was very invested in the conversation. It was just, I didn't connect with them like I do with other speakers. So it wasn't as fluid a conversation. But I could have gone in a whole spiral. I should give up actually interviewing people. I should stop doing summits, etc. I could go through this whole spiral because that could have been my interpretation of their comment. So the third thing you want to do is write, do I know that this is true? Yes or no? Or perhaps I don't know yet. And if you don't know yet, what information would you need to know before you could be certain? So, because sometimes the solution is more information. So it's not thinking more about it, because once again, unless you've got facts, you can't come up with an actual solution. So what happens, we caught up in an overthinking. They thought this person, like last night's example where I interviewed someone, this person thinks I'm no good at interviewing. Why don't they think I'm any good? Maybe I aren't any good at interviewing. So, and the cycle goes on. But unless there's actual facts, so if I really was concerned about it, then I could have gone, so what do you mean by that? So perhaps you could give me a little bit more feedback on that situation. So I'd need more information to come to the conclusion. And then the next question you want to ask yourself is, what else could be true? So just come up with one alternative for whatever you experienced this week. So what else could be true beyond what interpretation you gave to what you experienced? You just have to come up with one alternative. Because remember, now you're teaching your brain that there are other possibilities to this event. There are other possible meanings you could attribute to what you experience. And then last thing you want to do is, what is one constructive action I can take? So it could have been like last night, I could have asked for more clarification, which I actually did. You could have the difficult conversation. So rather than jumping to all conclusions, you can go off and have the conversation with the person. You could send the email, but not a reactionary email. It could be just a responsive email, just responding in a way that's appropriate. Maybe you've been in a heated discussion, so maybe you need to apologize. Maybe you need to set a boundary. Maybe you need to gather more information. If you're procrastinated, maybe you need to finish the task. Maybe you need to make a decision. Or maybe you just need to let the situation go. So you need to walk away and basically go, this is not important. I don't really need to keep on worrying about this. And that's your practice. So maybe before we go on, so maybe you can drop in a chat how that worked for you. So, so we've got a couple of people who've indicated things they've had trouble with, navigating health appointments, someone else's repetitive, annoying behavior, etc., mental overwhelm, lots of challenges, etc. So we've all have these events happening throughout our day. None of us are impervious to it. So does this process make sense to you guys? Does it kind of like resonate? Does it something that you think you can actually put into practice? Because remember, you don't have to get it right. You just need to go through these different steps to create the space to be able to actually respond to the situation, not get caught up in the loop. Definitely. So we want to take the emotions out. So as Janet says, so the important thing to remember, whatever you experience isn't reality. So that's one thing. So events don't have any intrinsic meaning at all. Because as we just mentioned, there are about 20 people on this call. All of us can interpret everything completely differently. And then we're going to layer in our past experiences, our past beliefs, our past patterns of behavior, and then we're going to create meaning and layer something onto something which we don't even know is the real situation at this particular point in time. And so we want to create that space so that we can actually respond. And then we consciously choose the space. So we first need to physiologically downregulate ourselves. So when we receive that email, like I used to have this client of mine, and then he used to be really challenging. Like he'd use like threatening emails if he didn't get his way. Why aren't you responding to me? You should be responding to me immediately. I'm going to take away all my business from you and all of this. And he used to wind me up. So this is a long time before I actually learnt how to do this kind of stuff. And then I would just immediately write back to him because I'd get all defensive and all of this kind of stuff. And so it would just like keep on a cycle and it would just wind me up. I was like getting very frustrated and very stressed by this one individual. And eventually I kind of like realized this guy is completely dysregulated and I'm allowing him to dysregulate me. So he's got his own kind of like challenges going on. And then he just does this because he enjoys getting a reaction. So I need to separate myself from that and not allow myself to react. Yeah. So don't worry about answering all the questions. You can do this afterwards. It's not a big deal. So because I'm going to give you the recording so you'll be able to record. But the thing was, and then most of our situations are exactly the same. We end up reacting and then it spirals out of control. In this case, he would respond back and I like react back, I'd react and it would be ongoing. And then at the end of the day, nothing would actually, it just eat up a bunch of time, nothing get resolved. This was just the way this person operated. So many of us have been in the same situation. So we want to be separating ourselves from whatever we're experiencing and then determining whether or not how we interpret these events or whatever we experience is actual reality. If it's not, great. We don't have to get caught up in it and we can respond appropriately. Or maybe we don't know yet, so we need more information. So our next logical response is to ask questions, gather more information. So remember, when we put in curiosity and we ask questions, we take ourselves out of a fight and flight into our prefrontal cortex. Our brain is wired that it will always go back to the prefrontal cortex if we start asking questions. But we have to use a physiological break to get us down regulated enough to ask the question. And then when we ask questions, like when we put in place curiosity, then we create space to bring in our prefrontal cortex to gather more information so we can respond to the situation. So the trick always is to notice when we're feeling ourselves getting dysregulated, when we're reacting to something, and then use the breath or some other physiological practice to bring us back into the body, to down-regulate ourselves, to create a bit of space, and then to get curious, and then to challenge also our initial meaning. So now you know, because most of us assume, like for a long time, I assumed everything was reality. Now I know that I create my reality. I, like the challenging boss, I created that reality. Like when he started getting offline, it was because I reacted to him. So I created that reality. So he had his own kind of like challenges, and then I bought into that, and then I created a stress reaction because I got caught up in giving meaning to the actual situation without actual any kind of like facts to actually be able to make a really kind of like educated response. So we all want to create that space. So as I mentioned, I've taught you this practice, and this is once again because you're all questers. I'm going to believe you are Legion Life questers. You're people who are committed to actually learning how to become more mind strong. You're committed to actually developing yourself and growing. And so you are people who are going to embody what I call active living. And active living is where we don't consume content. We actually look to take what we learn and apply it to our lives. Because the whole purpose of me teaching you this is such that you can start to be more responsive in how you show up in life as opposed to reactionary. So now I'm just going to reinforce this for another couple minutes so that you know what to do. And I'm going to set you to challenge. So this is going to be your mini quest for the next month, is to put into practice what we've actually learned today. Because I want you to train this mental muscle, the mental muscle to be able to respond to situations, to intercept the stress before it turns into a loop, before it dysregulates you, such that you can move forward and respond to life. So for the next month, whenever you notice yourself getting stuck in stress, you want to use pause, use your breath to center yourself. What are the facts of the situation? So whatever the event, whatever triggered you, what are the actual facts of the situation? What's the story? So this is the meaning I'm giving to these facts. You're going to check, is this true or not? Or I don't know yet. What are some alternative explanations for these particular facts? And then I'm going to choose my response. Could be gathering more information. It could be just letting it go, not worrying about it, whatever it is. So these are the 6 things you're going to practice over the next month. And then if you don't have any stressful events, you're still going to deliberately practice this each day. So whatever situation occurs, because even positive situations, you're putting a layer of your own interpretation on it. So whatever the situation is, you're going to use this process to interpret what you're experiencing so you can actually consciously make a decision to respond as opposed to react to something. So you're going to go, what happened? What meaning did I give it? Do I actually know the meaning is true? What were other possible alternatives or explanations? What response do I choose? And so this should take you 1 to 2 minutes. And when you're doing this, you're doing two things. You're training the skill when you're calm. So you're consciously making an effort to do this. So you're not doing this when you're overwhelmed. And then you're going to actually train it when you actually need it. So remember, it's a little bit like the gym. Or like imagine a sport. So in a sport, you're going to train if though it was a real world, so it's not a real situation, you're going to train such that when you are in the field, on the field, doing whatever your sport is, you have actually trained to be able to deal with the situation in real time. So you're going to have two types of practice over the next month. So sometimes you are going to be dysregulated, you're going to be caught up in a bit of a stressful situation. You're going to remember this practice and put it into play, but you're not going to be stressed every single day, hopefully. If you are, then you really need to be working on this practice. But even if you're not, you're going to put this into play at least once throughout the day. So where you're going to have an experience, then you're going to go through the steps, because then it becomes part of what you do on a day-to-day basis. It becomes something that you do when you actually need it. And this is how you build capacity. Just like going to the gym builds your capacity. So when you first go to the gym, it's a little bit challenging, but over time it becomes much easier because you've built your capacity to do it. Now you have a base level of fitness. And this is mental fitness we're developing. So now you want to measure your progress. So if you've been around me for a while, you understand that I believe you need to measure things. So this is not complex. You just need a baseline. You need to understand where you are at a particular point of time. And then at the end of a particular period of time, you want to see if you've made any improvements, because this validates that you've done the work. It validates that you've developed and increased your capacity. So if you don't do this measuring, it becomes very easy not to notice how much you've improved, such that you don't actually want to continue. So it's a little bit like people who aren't. I use fitness all the time because it's the easiest thing for me to kind of like give you a visual reference. So a lot of people go to the gym for the first time. Maybe they haven't been going for a period of time and they want to get fitter. So they rock up at the gym and they just get started. They get some program and they just get started. They go through the motions, but they've never really established where they started from. So they don't have any points to understand the weights they started with, the level of fitness, how they felt. And then they go for a period of time and then they go, well, I don't think I'm really getting any results here. I'm not, because they don't know where they started from and they don't measure along the way to see the improvement. So then because they believe they haven't achieved anything, they get disenchanted with the gym and they leave. And then they repeat the process and start all over again. So in whatever you do, you start with a baseline. Where am I today? It's not meant to judge yourself. It's just meant to say, this is where I'm at this particular point of time. And then you can measure yourself sometime in the future, just to give you information to notice that you're making progress, or to understand perhaps you didn't do the work you should have done to get the results you're actually looking for. So it's information again. It's not, once again, to beat yourself up. It's information to help you improve, because this is meant to be something that we implement and integrate into our day so that we can improve how we show up each day. So what I want you to do is today, after this video, ask yourself, When something triggers me, how often do I automatically believe my first interpretation? I'll repeat that. So when something triggers me, so there's some event, how often do I automatically believe my first interpretation? So we're going to score ourselves from 1 to 10. 1 means I rarely get caught by my first interpretation. And 10 means I almost always believe my first interpretation and react from it. So you want to write this number down, and this becomes your starting point for this month. So out of curiosity, do any of you feel comfortable rating yourself right now? So where are you? When you get triggered, do you believe whatever you've experienced like immediately? So this is how you automatically, your first interpretation, these are the facts of the situation. Or, so this is 10, or you really get caught by first interpretation. You're more inquisitive. You don't basically make any assumptions. So you, 1, I really get caught by my first interpretation. 10, I believe my first interpretation and react from it. So anyone comfortable giving me a number? Well, I can tell you my score some time ago would have been closer to 10. I believe that immediately the situation, I was very reactionary because I didn't have a process of actually being able to create a space. So it's something I needed to build my capacity in. I needed to be able to down-regulate myself, and then I needed to learn to respond to situation. So we have people saying 8, 9s, and 10s. We have a 6. Well, that's great because that's definitely someone who's created a bit of space for themselves to actually respond. And then, yes, it may fluctuate, but we're going to look on an average. So what's the average for us? Because remember, no judgments. It's meant to give us a baseline so that we have something to work on to actually improve. So at the end of the month, so we're going to do this for a whole month, and then I'm going to ask you before we start our lab next month to give your score. You don't have to give it, but I'm going to ask you to actually reflect back and then identify what your score is. But you don't have to worry so much about the score. The score is not that important. But what I would like you to notice is, have you become more able to catch yourself earlier? So rather than reacting, you're now able to create some space. Are you asking yourself or questioning your assumptions more quickly? Are you asking for information rather than just making assumptions? Are you choosing your response more often? So rather than reacting, you're actually choosing your responses. So rather than reacting, you're asking for more information, and then you're questioning your assumptions. So rather than immediately believing the first thing that jumps into your mind, you're actually going, is this actually true? Are there alternative ways to see the situation? Are there alternative interpretations for what this person, their comment, their email is actually meaning? And then are you able to catch yourself earlier? So you're able to notice that you're getting dysregulated. You're noticing that you want to believe this is a situation, and then you're able to create a pause, and then you start going through this actual process. Because if you've been working on this over the month, like just 1 time a day, so this is your mental fitness rep for the day, you're going to build your capacity. So you're not, this is not meant to say that you're never going to get stressed. So am I impervious to stress? No, I'm not. So I used to be very dysregulated. So now I'm very much more improved, but it's taken work. So you may still get angry, you may still worry, you may still be anxious, but this is not a failure because this is not to say you're good or bad. This is like you failed or not. So the goal is never that you never get stressed because that's impossible. Because actually you want to get stressed. You want to get out of your comfort zone. The goal is to get better at what happens next. So rather than being caught up in the loop, what you want to improve on is how you deal with the situation. Because remember, stress by itself is not bad. It only gets bad when we interpret it in a way that perpetuates the stress going forward. So, and then why does this matter to living a legend life? So, why, Damien, are you talking about legend life in the same um, voice that you also talk about mental fitness? Why? Because much of my life, I've had successes and I've had failures, and I've tried to work out why that actually occurred. Because my end game is like no different than yours. I'd like to live my best version of my life. What I discovered was that I had a conditioned mind. So basically, things in my past conditioned the way that I saw the world, and that was negatively impacting how I was showing up in the world. So it became clear to me that the only way for me to live the best version of myself, to realize my potential, was that I needed to master myself. I needed to master my mind. I needed to become more mind strong so I could actually live this kind of a life. Because if your mind is constantly interpreting everyday events as threats, criticism, rejection, failure, danger, it affects the way you live your life. You become reactive, and I was very reactive, actionary. So you make decisions from emotions rather than intention. You avoid things because you know they're going to get you stressed or whatever. You procrastinate because you worry about failing, mistakes, people judging you, etc. Like I put off hosting summits for a couple of years because I didn't think anyone would want me to host a summit and no one would actually turn up to be speakers. So I put off summits for a period of time because once again, because I had this conditioned mind that told me that maybe I wasn't good enough, and then this led me to view this as potentially threatening to me. So that caused some stress, and then I procrastinated and avoided doing these things. So I'm no different than the rest of you. So I'm on the journey as well. I'm on my Legend Life quest because I don't want to be defensive. I don't want to be reactionary. I want to be responsive to life. I don't want to miss out on opportunities. I want to become more effective at navigating life, interpreting the patterns of life, interpreting my reactions with other people more effectively, such that I can lead the kind of life I want to live. I don't want to spend all my energy fighting situations, seeing them as being negative, um, when it's just my mind creating this interpretation of events. I want to show up and as my whole and authentic self. I want to be able to effectively interpret and navigate things. So, or whatever I'm experiencing, to identify where there are opportunities, to make the best choices, the best decisions that enable me to live the kind of life I want to live. So, Mind Strong isn't about eliminating stress. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about developing the capacity to feel, think, choose, and act more intentionally. So, I have this acronym that I call MICE, which is I want to be more mindful, I want to be more intentional, I want to be conscious, and I want to fully engage in life, which is not possible if I am always reacting to situations. So I want to be mindful, intentional, conscious, and fully engaged in life so I can make the right choices, the right decisions, and I can act more intentionally and more effectively. But it requires us to take responsibility for our mind. So, what happened to create the conditioned mind, my conditioned mind, I didn't have any control over. So these events that occurred throughout my childhood that shaped how I saw the world, I can't change that, but I can take responsibility for how I deal with this going forward. So I can basically go, I don't have any responsibility and I don't have any control over this. And these events occurred and they negatively impacted me. They created my conditioned mind, and then I'm going to react throughout the rest of my life. Well, that's not me taking ownership for my life, taking responsibility for how I want to show up. So I can't change that, but I can change what I do going forward. So this is what MindStrong is. It's about self-mastery. It's about taking responsibility for training our minds to be more effective in how we move forward in our lives. And that's why I am such a big proponent or person who says everyone needs to proactively work on their mental fitness because it's something that's helping me on my journey. So it's not ever, it's not over. I'm still working on it, just like the rest of you. Maybe I'm a little bit more further down the path because I've been doing this for quite a while. And then I've also interviewed lots of people to help myself and then also understand what's possible. Because if you want to live a legend life, you need the mental capacity to actually engage with life rather than continually react to the stories your mind creates about it. So now I'm going to hand it over to you guys. And basically, if you have any questions, I'm available to answer any questions, and then I'll just finish up with a couple more questions. So, got comments, people thank me. That's fine. But any questions, I'm available to answer any questions because I want to make this practical. So the MindStrong Labs, like they're meant to be interactive. They're meant to get you to actually put this into practice. So I definitely want you guys. So put a note in the comments that you're committed to actually practice this. That you're actually committed to put this into practice for the next month. So every day I'm asking you for 2 minutes to put this into practice. And then to, at the end of this call, make sure you get your number and then move forward. And then next month, we're going to look at how we progress. What's the best way to help with recurring thought blocks that you've cleared but still show up? So, well, this is a stress pattern. So this is a question from, let me have a look here. AA. So I don't know who that is. So all of us have like patterns, and so the underlying thing we need to address is the stress pattern that's leading to this. So we have these, so when we get stressed, we have a meaning, which is a consistent meaning we're applying to a certain situation. And then this leads to our nervous system reacting. Then we have a part of us that I call, what I call the advisor, which is our default mode network, interprets this and then actually will bring back these emotional patterns, thought patterns, behavior patterns to stop us actually feeling this on an ongoing basis. So what we need to do is learn to regulate ourselves. We need to always like bring us back into where we feel regulated, because when we're regulated, we can actually start thinking more effectively. So we default to thought patterns when we're actually dysregulated, and then we don't have time to do this. Then we look to challenge. We first do this investigation. We kind of like understand this, and then we challenge and neutralize. So the process, which we'll go into more depth, and I'll talk a little bit about in the masterclass next week, is like we notice that we are dysregulated, then we look to intercept this, then we regulate, then we do this we investigate, which we're doing today. Is this reality? We see how we're perceiving a particular situation, because what's happening is that we're consistently interpreting a situation with past meaning, and that's leading to the same thoughts over and over again. So we want to intercept that nervous system reaction. Then we want to investigate, ask our question, is this reality? Is this the actual true interpretation of this situation? Could there be alternatives? So by investigating, we're not going to get into that same thought loop. We're actually intercepting it, and then we can challenge it, and then we can neutralize it, because we've proven that there could be some other alternative. So like in today's practice, one of our actions could be to get more information as part of investigation. And then with that more information, we determine, in fact, this is not the reality. And then we can neutralize it, because we can reframe the situation, or we can diffuse it and go, well, this is just an emotion and thought pattern. It's not reality. It's not true. So that's the important thing to think about, is that when we have an event, the event by itself has no meaning. The meaning we give to an event is just based on past meaning given to an event, is the interpretation we're giving at this particular point in time. But this is not reality. This is just a thought exercise, or it's an emotion that we've used to actually doing. It's not reality. It's just, so we need to separate ourselves for us. The problem is, when you say you're having repeating thought patterns, is when we start to identify, I'm the type of person who has these kind of thoughts all the time, or identify with the emotions I'm feeling. Like, as I mentioned, I used to be very dysregulated. My defensive mechanism was anger. To armor up, to protect myself, was to basically, like, I'd get hyperactive. Like my son, he gets hypo active or reactive, where he kind of shuts down. I armor up and want to go to war, because that's how I defended myself when I was younger. So then that was my reaction. I'd get angry thoughts, I'd get angry emotions, and then I used to think that I was an angry person. But I'm not an angry person. I had a pattern, which was when I interpreted events or people's reactions, my nervous system saw it to be similar to something I experienced when I was a child. And then my defensive mechanism, before so I'll deal with this and then I'll come back to you, Brenda. So then I would like, so I'd interpret this situation as being, this is similar to that past thing. My nervous system would get all wound up. I'd start to get angry. I'd get wound up, and I'd start to have this interpretation of this based on a past event. And then I began to believe I was an angry person, but it was just a pattern. And then once I learned to intercept, so notice myself getting wound up, then I use some physiological things like, stamping your feet, or like pinching your fingers or something, just to physically get me out of it. And then I could regulate with some breaths. So just breathe in, breathe out. So nothing complex. And then I created a space, and I didn't have to react, and I could go, why am I getting wound up? Remember the client I mentioned? I used to get wound up and angry and go on the offensive. And then I began to realize, well, this guy is dysregulated. So I'm allowing him to affect me. So I'm not going to let that happen. So then I could respond to the situation. So our default thoughts and emotions are not who we are. And that's the other problem with a stress loop. Sometimes we begin to identify with that stress loop, with the thoughts and emotions, and that perpetuates the stress loop because we think we are the type of person who is doing those things. Like I used to think I was an angry person. And that was who I am. I can't change that. My father was an angry person. I'm an angry person. But it's not reality. It was just patterns. So, and then you need to learn to change those patterns by not attaching yourself to the thoughts and emotions, just to see them as being how you respond, reacting to a situation and creating separation from them and then identifying how you actually want to show up. So I don't want to show up being angry. I don't want to show up being aggressive or confrontational. I want to respond appropriate to the situation. So by creating that space and not seeing myself as the thoughts I was having or the initial reactions I was feeling, I was able to create space and then choose to act quite differently. So hopefully that helps AA. So let's look at questions Brenda had. So do you use anger to motivate yourself? I used to in the past. But I've learned it's not very useful because it just perpetuates the actual like problem. What's more effective, and then actually something you'll learn in the MindStrong Summit, is using compassion. So you may be going to me, well, that sounds strange. Um, Compassion, that's something gentle and soft, but you have something called fierce compassion as well. So compassion is basically having sensitivity to the suffering you're actually feeling, but actually wanting to do something about it. So it's more effective. So like instead of being angry, beating yourself up, using a lot of negative self-criticism, which actually just doesn't make you feel good. Instead, you want to use like a passion where you are sensitive to the situation, maybe you're procrastinating, and then you go, well, for me to live a better life, I need to, and not have this suffering that comes from procrastinating, I need to take this type of action. I need to take responsibility for acting and then take the necessary first step. Anger doesn't work. Like anger would just kind of like spiral me into getting more angry and eventually lead to me being critical of myself. So it's not as effective. And then, as Brenda says, it takes too much energy to be angry. So you don't have the energy to actually apply to resolving a situation or coming up with alternatives because now you're wound up and burnt up with all kind of like negative energy. So Brenda talks about being gentle with yourself, and gentle is being compassionate with yourself. And then the same with other people, being compassionate or being empathetic for what they're going through. Like I needed to be empathetic with that client I had to understand that he was a dysregulated person, and then he had this was his pattern, and there's nothing I could do to change it, but by me reacting, I was making the situation worse for myself and for him. So AA says, yes, the shutdown is very real. So I'd ask how much does environment have an impact? And if it is really hard, does it help leaving the environment? Or would you say it's important to master it in that environment to grow? Well, it depends on the intensity of the situation. Like for myself, Often the benefit was to leave the environment because I couldn't, it depends on the level of ability you have to regulate yourself. So I find it's more effective sometimes to go, hey, I need a break, and then step out of the environment for a bit, just to allow yourself to create space because it's very easy to spiral out of control. So to create that space and then come back, because that's still training, it's still training yourself to have that capacity. So you don't need to stick in the environment to be able to do it. But what you're doing, if you apply this throughout the day in micro doses, you're slowly building that capacity so that soon, when you're in that similar environment, you can actually feel that you can create that space. Like sometimes now I can feel I can create that space and respond to the situation. So I don't need to remove myself from the environment. But if you don't have that training and you don't trust yourself to be able to respond, then it's better to leave the environment and create the space so you can come back later to actually deal with it. Because it's better to respond always than react. And if you don't feel that you can respond and that you're going to react, then it's better to create that space. And you don't have to muscle your way through it. So Anna asks question, is it or will it be possible to ever recover from having or viewing life through a negative lens based on past pain? How and or what is the best way? So the reality is we're negatively biased. So we're always going to interpret things from a negative kind of like perspective. But what we can do is develop what are called pro-resilient circuits. So this is one way. So one way is to develop other capacities. So remember the stress circuit is a pattern. So it's like a pattern in your brain. So these neuro circuits are wired in a particular way, and that's how we react. But we can develop other patterns so that we will respond to situations. We'll go to the prefrontal cortex more often than we've done in the past because we've got a different route. So we have to train this. There is a method or approach which is a little bit beyond our labs. It's called memory reconsolidation, where basically, remember, the reason we're giving meaning to an event today is because of a meaning that we learnt in the past. So we learnt this when we were in our childhood. So we had a meaning and a nervous system reaction. Now we're applying that same meaning to how we're experiencing life at this particular point in time. So, so this is a memory. So it's a physiological memory. So this is the thing to remember. Like memories are physiological. They're not just like cognitive. So they're actually in our body as well, and they're like emotional. So there's an emotional connection which leads to a memory. So it's something that's been very emotive for us. So memory reconsolidation is a process where you bring back that past memory. So this is usually in childhood where we may have learned that maybe we're not good enough. And then you look at the event that led to you coming to that conclusion, I'm not good enough. You bring that up in the present, so where we are today. So obviously you need to be regulated and in a space where you feel safe and secure. And then you bring up that past memory and the emotions related to that, and then you apply your current wisdom where you are at this particular point of time, and then prove that meaning isn't valid anymore. Because remember, that meaning was because you gave one interpretation to what could have been multiple situations. And then at that same time, by showing this conflict between the present and that past memory, because that past memory is influencing how you show up, you actually create what's called a prediction error, and that changes that memory. So then you need to do it a couple of times, and then eventually it teaches your brain and your nervous system that that memory is no longer valid. And now there's a new memory, which is coming from your more responsive, your regulated, safe, secure, present self. So it's a process called memory reconsolidation. So that's the high level. So you can eventually remove those past memories, but it requires you to do some of the mental fitness training I talked about, building pro resilience circuits, where like the curiosity, we're being present with your thoughts. Um, having connections also important. So it's stuff I'll be able to go into a little bit more depth a little bit later. I call it developing the happy mind, which is mental fitness. Mind Strong is more mental performance, where we actually are able to we leverage the capacity we've built to be able to show up and perform in life, not be negatively impacted by what we're experiencing. So that's my long-winded answer. Sorry about that. But yes, the answer is you're not going to be limited by those negative experiences. There are processes that can help you overcome them, and there are particular methodologies out there that allow you to do so. It's called memory reconsolidation. Some people will say it's rewiring the brain, but basically it's called memory reconsolidation as a psychological term. So AA is asking what book or author has had the most impact on my professional journey. So, well, actually, I don't have one person because a lot of the people are very focused on one thing. So like today for the MindStrong Summit, I spoke to Professor Paul Gilbert, who does compassion focused therapy. And I really like his approach on compassion. Um, so like breath work, like there's been Deborah Rosman with heart coherence. I don't buy into completely heart, thinking about the heart, but the actual coherent breathing and then the methodology they use, I do look into that. Um, Patrick Porter, sorry, Dr. Patrick Porter from Brain Tap. He's been pretty influential on like how we can train our brains. He's been a good expert for me. Um, so these are ones that just pop into my head at this particular point of time because they're front of mind. So I've interviewed actually close to nearly 200 people after this summit. And then each of them are giving different perspectives on different things, and then I learn from that, and then I do further research to make it relevant for me. So if you would like to know more about me, just briefly, I'm a New Zealander, obviously, and New Zealanders are very black and white. I'm also an ex-rugby player, which means that I don't suffer falls, and I like to get right to where I'm going to get a result. So I'm not very into fluffy kind of stuff. Um, so when you hear something from me, it's because I've tried to find stuff that kind of resonates with me, that works for me because I'm very practical. I like to do things that get me results and get me to where I want to go. So I look to people who don't use a lot of flowery kind of like stuff, and they basically putting their spin on it. I like people who get to straight to the point, give factual kind of stuff that makes sense to me, a blend of neuroscience, scientific neuroscience with behavioral psychology. I don't like talk therapy because I don't think it actually works. People use somatic, like using your body, because your body is this incredible thing and we don't use it. Like it produces neurochemicals that help us navigate life effectively. It we have our breath, which allows us to regulate ourselves. We even have like touch pathways called CT fibers on our body, which help us regulate. So we can use our body to do a lot of interesting kind of things, which is only stuff I learned over the last 3 or 4 years interviewing people. So, but those three people are good people to kind of like start with. Everything I've done, I've kind of like blended together what I've kind of like learned from other people, what makes sense. I don't like buying into one particular methodology because it creates limits. Because someone is using their belief system and what they believe to sell you a product. So that's why I go. I want you all to assume responsibility to learning. And then the only way you can learn is don't take for gospel what I say. I'm trying to give you what I've learned, but put it into practice. And if it works for you, then you know this is something worthwhile. And that's what I do. I learn something, I apply it, I experiment, and then I learn, which is real learning from the experience, and then I build on that, and then I move forward. And that's what you need to do with all the experts as well, because they've all got their own particular bent. And I guess why I'm different, because I'm not trying to call myself an expert. I'm also trying to be what I call the universal human. What does that mean? Which means that I'm not going to focus just on stress and that's the only thing I ever do in my life. I'm interested in all the other elements surrounding that. I have quite a bit of knowledge about stress because I've lived it, experienced it. I've even had a temporary stroke because of it. So that's why I'm interested in it, because it impacted me physically. And then I learned quite a bit of depth about it, but I learned other things as well, which I think are equally as important. So that's why I'm never going to be the expert in compassion, the expert in blah, blah, blah. Because my expertise or what I want to be known for is helping other people take responsibility for their lives and learning how to master themselves. So that's why I bring on the experts in particular topics to give you a broad range of information so you can create your own thing that works for you. Because I don't think there's only one thing that works for every single person. Something different resonates with each of us. So you've got to become your own petri dish where you actually put into practice some of the things that resonate with you and sound factual, apply them, see if it works, learn a little bit more, apply it more, and then if it really works, that becomes integrated into your life. So anything that requires you to do hours and hours by itself, um, I don't believe in. Like mindfulness is something I integrate into my day. I believe in mindfulness, but I don't believe I need to sit on a cushion for 20, 30 minutes to learn mindfulness because there's something else called integrative contextual training. So, what does that big word mean? It means that you need to learn and apply things in real time. Because the Buddhist monk sitting in a monastery isn't living my life. The Buddhist monk isn't like when I'm in the middle, when I had a business, was bleeding cash. I had someone coming to me and say, now you're a father. When I said I'm never going to be a father, all on the same day. I was letting go people. I just lost a large sum of money. I was losing more. Sitting on a cushion wasn't going to train me for that. But being mindful and present and my training every day, being mindful and present in all the challenging things I do throughout my life, made me resilient. All the experiences I had, which all of you have, and then I reflect on them and I learn from them, they make me resilient. So just doing things in isolation doesn't work. And then more recent psychology proves you need to train yourself in real time. You don't train to become an expert in a sport by sitting on a couch watching an expert tell you how to do it. You actually do it in real time. That's what we all need to do. So, so there's a question here. Let's see. Will expressing to the person who triggers you about how their behavior impacts you ever help fix the dysregulation? And why do you not like or believe in talk therapy? Okay, so two parts to the question. You can certainly have, so if you're regulated enough to kind of like have a conversation, not a reactive conversation with someone to discuss um, how their behavior impacts you, and then you know that other person is also responsive and not dysregulated, you can have that conversation. But sometimes you've got to remember that some people are patterned in a particular way that they will actually take you coming to them and saying this will actually dysregulate them and then they'll have a reaction to you. Sometimes some people you need to separate yourself from them and then create some kind of like boundaries. Um, sometimes it's not possible to have a conversation with people because it may lead to both of you becoming dysregulated. So you'd have to know how, if that's a very reactionary person and always zone things, well, that can just like perpetuate the problem. Sometimes it's best to create a boundary and not allow that person to impact you. And why do you not like or believe in talk therapy? Because it's basically it looks at dealing with the challenges we have as a cognitive problem. So talk therapy is all thinking that you can deal with things in the brain. And then hopefully from today, I've made clear that stress is a physiological thing. Your nervous system you experience life, your nervous system interprets life and then applies meaning to it. And then you have reactions physiologically before your cognitive brain comes on point. So you need to physiologically, most talk therapy doesn't look at your physiology. So the thing they provide you is a safe environment, but your physiology, you need to be able to learn to deal with what's going on in your physiology. And most talk therapy will actually get you to replay over and over again the things that get you stressed, and you'll never resolve them. You need to resolve them on a physiological level before you can actually bring on a cognitive, like I mentioned, memory reconsolidation. That's using your physiology to change a past memory, because a memory is physiology. It's in your brain. It's like a pattern. It's like neurochemicals, and that fires a whole series of your neurons to react in a particular way. So most talk therapy doesn't address that. So for me, you need someone who brings together somatic and understands your physiology, like from stress like trauma is experienced in the body. Like I said, I armor up. Why? Because I used to get dragged out of bed by my father and given a hiding. a lot of the time I used to barricade the door and he'd drag me out of bed and give me a hide. And then the way I've defended myself was getting angry and then going on the offensive. And that's how I my trauma was how I used to do it. So when someone else confronts me, instantly my body, my nervous system goes, this person's doing exactly what my father used to do to me. And then even though that person isn't going to physically do anything to me, and my body reacts, so it's not my mind. Like talk therapy people, like when I was 13, said I had antisocial behavior and I was an angry person. They didn't investigate anything that was happening in my home. They just assumed that it was my mind, but it wasn't my mind. It was my physiology. It was the way I defended myself. So, and I'm not that person. That was my physiology reacting to a particular situation. So that's why I don't like talk therapy because it doesn't really address the realities of the situation. I think there are better ways to actually address it. And we live in a world now where there's more information, there's more about nervous system regulation, there's more about becoming aware of how your body responds to things. And so there's a whole range of different ways. And talk therapy is long, it doesn't fix you, it just perpetuates the problem. And now there are a lot of approaches which help you fast track that because you start to get in tune with your body. So I think there are alternatives that you should look at. But once again, you have to work what works for you. So Brenda mentions that relationships are dynamic and there's no one size fits all, which is pretty much where like you that's why you have to you there's a list. I gave you a list of examples on how you could what you choose your next action. You're going to respond based on each person and the situation because now you're in a position to do that. You're no longer reacting. You've created the space. You've asked some questions. You're able to interpret the situation more effectively, maybe rather than one of the things you would like to do is ask more information. Can you give me more clarity about what you're talking about, etc. So what if it's family and you have to be around them? Well, once again, it's an internal work, so you need to do the work yourself to be less um, reactive, to be responsive, but you still have the opportunity, even with it's your family, to leave the room. Like sometimes my son triggers me, so I have to leave the room, or I will go out for a walk. So you can still separate yourself from the environment, even though temporarily, because you're just creating that pause in that space so you can make a decision on how you want um, to actually step forward going forward rather than reacting. Because what happens when I react? If I react in a bad way, what happens? I have shame. Why did I react like that? I start having guilt. And then what does my body do? My nervous system goes, well, that's stressful. I don't want to feel that. And then the stress loop starts all over again. The stress pattern gets reacted, and then I'm caught up all over again. I don't want to feel that. So, Damien, in my case, because my natural stress pattern was to be angry, I start to get angry because I armor up because it defends me from feeling the shame, from feeling the actual guilt. So, and then when I do that again, then I get shame and guilt, and then it perpetuates from there. So that's why you want to separate yourself from the situation, give yourself space so you can actually respond. You want to develop some nervous system ways you can physiologically down regulate yourself so that you can think through your brain as opposed to react through your body, your nervous system. So is memory consolidation the same as EMDR? No, it's actually something different. Um, EMDR is a way to process, like, I'm not an expert in this. I've had two interviews on EMDR, um, but it's a way to help you get more regulated in a situation so you can interpret the situation more effectively. So from a less regulated, dysregulated perspective, and it's very, my understanding with EMDR is very effective with trauma. Memory reconsolidation is something a little bit different. So I'm not an expert, so I can't give you a full answer, but it's
Ouais.
something to
Oui.
investigate a little bit more. Santa says, what if they stop you from leaving or removing yourself by challenge you harder? I need to understand a little bit more. But most people, if you go, like, just give us a moment, or I needed to go to the bathroom, I just need a glass of water, or I need, just need to step outside a little bit. Like, I want to continue this conversation, but I just need to take a space. They should be okay with that, because you're not saying you're not going to have the conversation. You're just saying, I need a bit of space. I'm feeling a bit, you know, I feel like I need a bit of space to be able to collect my thoughts, so that I can come back and we can talk about this where I'm feeling I can think a little bit more clearer. No one should have an actual problem with that. If you're upfront with them, you can validate how important it is to them, and you can just say that, Les, this is important to me as well. But I want to give this my best attention. But at the moment, I'm a little bit emotional, or I'm a little bit upset, a little bit angry. But I just need a bit of a break to come back so I can be a little bit more rational in the situation. So hopefully that helps. So somatic, that means basically body. So there are things like somatic experiencing. Now you talk about, you've probably heard about, in the past, everything used to be about cognitive intelligence, your brain. Then it moved to somatic intelligence. No, moved to emotional intelligence, like managing your emotions, and then being able to understand the emotions of others. But now, um, the real root of everything is somatic intelligence, which is being able to identify what's going on in your body. So, as I mentioned, your nervous system is how you interpret the world. So, it's not your cognitive. The nervous system interprets things, gives information, and then if the information is benign or it's positive, it doesn't cause any dysregulation, then your prefrontal cortex will come online and be able to look at things. But if it's something that is fight or flight, it's like threatening, there's a risk to your security or safety, then you go straight into the amygdala. Your nervous system's detected it, then you don't have any cognitive. Now it's all about reacting because you're trying to keep yourself safe and secure. So, somatic intelligence is being able to understand what's happening in your body, noticing maybe it's clenching of the jaw, maybe it's tightness in the neck, maybe tightness in the chest, noticing your heart starting to beat a little bit faster, or noticing like sweat on the brow, but being able to identify, oh, I'm starting to get dysregulated, so that you can then intercept that before you get caught in a pattern, so that you can be responsive. So to bring your prefrontal cortex back online. So that's what somatic is. It's basically your body. So, well, physiological symptoms are kind of like mentioned. So basically, what you want to do for a period of time is actually track what you're feeling throughout the day and how your body kind of like reacts. Because your body is always whispering to you. It's telling you what you need. It tells you when you're thirsty. It tells you when you're hungry. It tells you when you need to go to the bathroom. It tells you when you're getting dysregulated as well. So you just need to spend time tracking what happens. Um, in a challenge I did last year, I actually gave out a sheet and you can probably find something like this online, where the different your signals from your body can indicate different emotions that you're actually experiencing. So basically, you just want to pay attention to what's going on, and then when you're triggered, to notice what's happening within you. When you have any kind of like event, what your physical reaction actually is. Most of us don't tune into this. We kind of like ignore it. So it's just like paying attention to what's actually going on. Each of us will have different physiological kind of reactions, even though similar to some degree. So you want to pay attention to your own personal triggers, and then your physiological reaction with particular situations. And then you can go into tracking your emotions. And then this is something we can go into in more detail at another session. And then also, I'll be doing a challenge which is called the Stress to Calm Challenge, where I'll walk you through more how do you actually master stress as opposed to just manage stress. And part of that is what they call interoception, which is basically being able to read your body more effectively. So hopefully at a high level that kind of like helps. Like the question is, if you after you do this work, can you ever be okay and able to sit with people who trigger you, and will, I don't know if the love will ever return, but the goal of this is that we become mind strong. So it's a quest to be able to sit in situations and with people who dysregulate us and not have them negatively impact us. But the work is to get to that stage, because we've all got stress patterns. We all become dysregulated, and then these stress patterns take over. So our goal is to be able to regulate ourselves, be able to separate ourselves from this, identify when we are becoming dysregulated, and then to come up with different ways to respond to those situations, and then to do things like memory reconsolidation, to do mental fitness training, such that we develop what are called pro-resilient circuits so that we can navigate life with more balance. So we don't find ourselves reacting, that we become more responsive, but it's a journey. So it will take each of us different, because it will depend on where we're at this particular point of time, how wide our window of tolerance is. Um, but we can work on it. We're going to work on it to improve. Like, I'm nowhere where I want to be, but it's work in progress. So, but eventually you can get to where you are in a situation, but it requires putting in the work, just like fitness. You don't get fit by just going to the gym once. You don't be able to go on a long distant hike by just walking around the block once. You have to build in consistency. You make this a regular process, and then eventually you can get to where you are able to not be dysregulated by situations that dysregulated. You don't become reactionary. You're able to deal with the situation. So, and the byproduct of this as well, which is that if you are able to be regulated, you will actually help other people become regulated as well. It's called co-regulation, because our nervous system is paying attention to how other people respond or react to us. So when I'm in a meeting, I'm paying attention. My nervous system is seeing how that person's looking, whether or not, how they're kind of reacting, the sound of their voice and all of that, to create interpretations. So if I'm agitated and dysregulated and I get armored up, well, that communicates through my physiology and my energy, because we transfer energy as well, our heart pumps out energy, and that gets recorded by the nervous system of the other person, and then they will start to get dysregulated because we become a threat. But if we're calm, regulated, responsive, and we are able to not be dysregulated, we will actually help soothe the other person's nervous system. So if we do the work, we will have a benefit on those around you. Like, so just imagine your kids. So if you're dysregulated, and then your kids can sense that, and then they become dysregulated. So my son used to sense that I was dysregulated, and that would make him dysregulated. But if I'm calm, and I go to him when he is dysregulated, I, by being calm, will soothe him and help him regulate himself. So this work is beneficial for you and for everyone else in your life. So if you have someone who's dysregulated and causes you to be dysregulated, well, you can't change them. They have to do the work. But you can do the work, and by the fact that you don't get dysregulated by them, you will actually help soothe their nervous system. You will help them be able to regulate more effectively. So that's why doing things like this is beneficial in a whole lot of different dimensions. And that's why thinking and talk therapy doesn't teach you any of this stuff. It doesn't teach you about your physiology. It doesn't teach you about how your body affects how you show up and how it affects how other people relate to you. So if you're regulated, calm, conscious, present, and you don't get dysregulated, and you can feel compassion for other people and how they are. Like eventually with that client, I didn't react to him. I became responsive. And then eventually he didn't react anymore. Over time, he became better at relating with me because I didn't react like I did in the past. So obviously he's probably doing some of his own work, but you know, it helps. So, or and I'll take this last question. Even if the other person doesn't take accountability, does the work rely on you alone? At the end of the day, and how can you encourage them to do their own work? Well, for me, the best way to demonstrate anything to anyone is to do the work yourself. So it's a little bit like dealing with kids. So if you have a kid and you tell them to do something, but you do something completely different, um, then we have something called, and then Brenda kind of reinforces this. We have mirror neurons. So if you do the work, you show your response, you don't get regulated, you don't get affected by them, well, and then they will begin to respond in kind, but they'll also see that something different has occurred, and then they may start to be curious and they may want to ask you how that could help them. So modeling is the best way to do anything. You can never convince anyone to do it. That's why you can never, that expression, you can never make a horse or take a horse to drink water or whatever. I can't remember at this time. It's late at night here. It's 9 o'clock.
You can
So
lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
exactly. Well, thank you. So, you can never make another person do anything. So you can only model what you're doing, and then hopefully that resonates with them, and then they go off and actually do it. At the end of the day, um, this is your life, and you are ultimately responsible for leading that life in the best way for you. So you got to do the work. And then you got to do the work for you. You're not doing it for necessary for other people, although it will benefit other people. You do it so you can show up and be a better partner. You do it to show up to be a better parent. You do it to show up so you can be the best version of yourself, so you can share what you're here to share with the rest of the world. So you do the work for yourself, and you're the only person who can be accountable to yourself. If someone else wants you to help them be accountable, yes, be available to do that. But you can't expect other people to change, even though you'd like them to, because it's up to them to make that decision themselves. So having the expectation other people be a particular way is basically leading you to disappointment. So the only person we have control of in the world is ourselves, and then how we respond to the world. We can influence other people by our behavior and our choices and how we respond, but we can't control them like they cannot control us. And so we have to be mindful of that. So do the work yourself, and then that's when you will, you know, like lead the kind of life you want to kind of like live. And as I said, you just have to navigate other people, create boundaries where if they're toxic, where possible. Um, you just have to make choices. Like at the end of the day, you only got one life, and then you don't need to kind of like allow toxicity to kind of like impact how you show up. Um, so that's about as much as I have to say about that. As to the tracking sheet, that's more part of the actual like challenge, but I'm sure you can search online and find um, how to so what does your body tell you about your emotions, and there'll be some sheets currently available for that. So I will call it today because I think I've kept you guys going for a long time. The labs are actually meant to be quite short so you don't get overwhelmed and you don't actually take up a lot of time. And this has turned into a bit of a masterclass, which I don't have a problem with. I'm just mindful that everyone's got an evening family and everyone else to kind of like take care of. So I myself have to start preparing dinner for my son. So he's probably like getting a little bit anxious at the moment, going, why is my father not providing me with some food? So I thank you. This is going to be a monthly event. So we're going to have this every month, same time on a Tuesday. Um, Tomorrow, I will give you a little bit of detail. I'll be doing a masterclass next uh, next Tuesday, which will be also free. So it'll be like a 90-minute more teaching, but there will be a practical element for to this. And then also look out for in October, I'll have which I'll tell you about next month anyway, which will be a summit based on MindStrong. So this is going to be us working towards that. And then if you haven't taken the Legend Life Pledge, make sure you do it. I've opened this up to everyone, but I'm kind of like making this for people who have shown some level of commitment, which is simple. You just click a button, put in your name, say you're committed, take the pledge, and then we'll have the first Tuesday of every month will be the Legend Life Assembly. Awesome. Brenda's shown her poster, so she's taken the pledge. So she'll definitely be here. So so it's just a commitment. It's just basically that's it. There's no cost involved. And then the Legend Life Assembly won't be so much about mental fitness, it'll be more about how we live what I call a legend life. So more about how do we live more purposefully, realize our potential, actively engage and live life. How do we actually continue approaching life as a quest? So we're all on the quest. We're all on some kind of quest. I've given you your quest for MindStrong this particular month. So I look forward to hearing your feedback on how that went. It'll be the same framework where there will be Q&A at the end, but it'll be meant to be very practical, give you an experience so you go off and actually apply it. So hopefully this was useful, and I'll also continue with the email so you receive that. Also, I'll do videos. I find videos, if you can put up with my New Zealand accent. I like talking, obviously, so I've been going for 2 hours here. So it's a little bit it's a little bit easier than writing because writing is not very interactive for me. So I actually like communicating verbally. So I'll continue with the YouTube videos as well. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening. You can also, obviously, if you have any questions after this, drop me an email. And because I'm recording this, I'll actually post that online, or I'll link to it in an email tomorrow, but also I'll post it in the Facebook group. So I know some of you may not be fans of the Facebook group, but the Facebook group is where I'll be posting stuff as well. So you can always access it from there, because email sometimes doesn't get to people. Our friends in email land, Google and all the rest, make it more and more difficult to get emails to you. So at least in the Facebook group, you can always go and find a link to the YouTube video or to a LinkedIn article. And then also things like this I'll post in the Facebook group as well. So awesome. Well, thank you for showing up. Number one, thank you also for staying to the end. And I look forward to seeing you next time. So have a good night. Take care. Bye.